Oh, this is so weird. It's like I'm watching myself in picture. Tell me if this sounds familiar. You watched this movie and liked it. Then when you found out it had sequels, you were happy to check those out too. But these movies don't seem to have much connecting them at all. And even within each movie, there are lots of mysterious details that are never explained. Questions that are never answered. And now it's driving you crazy. What did I just watch? I need somebody to explain this to me. Fortunately, that's why I'm here. Cloverfield is an example of what I like to call a mystery box story, definition on screen. And I've dedicated myself to explaining as many of them as possible. If you have unanswered questions about the convoluted lore of a story you've just finished, then I'm the person who can give you those answers. Then afterwards, I give each mystery box story a rating out of 10, using my 10 criteria for what makes mysteries like these fun and engaging. So, let's see if we can put the pieces together and figure out the lore of the Cloverfield franchise. On the surface, the Cloverfield franchise appears to be just a series of 3 loosely related movies. But there's more here than meets the eye. For one, all the movies were written and/or produced by our old friend J.J. Abrams. If we know anything about this guy, it's that the stuff he works on is never simple. It might turn out to be total gobbledygook, but there's always some kind of puzzle to decode in whatever he makes. For another, all 3 movies leave you hanging in some way at the end, not explaining what happened to the main characters or telling you how the events of the story even came to be. It might be easy to assume this was done as a way to keep the lore ambiguous, something many movies have done as an artistic choice. But oh no, there is way more for you to find out if you're willing to dig for it. With that said, before I really get into it, I'm going to do something that I hardly ever do. Give a spoiler warning. Generally speaking, I think if you click on a video called blank explained, the spoilers are implied. But if your only experience with this franchise is watching all 3 movies once, then you don't even know what you don't know yet. There's a substantial web of multimedia additions to the Cloverfield mythos, and if that's something you want to explore yourself first, go do that before you watch this video. But maybe you don't feel like digging through decade-old promotional websites, in which case, I'm happy to spoil it all for you. Now, let's start explaining. The first thing we need to do is a quick rundown of what happened in the movies. Lay out all the facts so that we can start piecing things together. The first movie in the franchise is just called Cloverfield. It's a found footage movie set in then present day New York. The story follows main character Rob and his friends. Rob had recently started dating his longtime friend Beth, but things got rocky between them when Rob accepts a job in Japan. They have a big fight during Rob's going away party and Beth leaves. Shortly after that, a giant monster attacks the city. Rob makes it his mission to rescue Beth from the wreck of her apartment, so he and his friends journey all across this destruction to find her, dodging the monster, the military, and a bunch of smaller parasite monsters that fall off the big monster's body, with Rob's friend Hud filming it all. We're given almost no direct information about what the monster is and where it came from, and we don't even get a good look at the monster other than this one shot at the end. Rob is able to find Beth and tell her he loves her, but by this point, most other people in the city have evacuated, and the military is about to bomb everything to kill the monster. The found footage ends when the bomb drops, and Rob and Beth probably die, although you don't actually see them die. On to the second movie, 10 Cloverfield Lane. This movie follows a woman named Michelle, who crashes her car and wakes up in an underground bunker. The owner of the bunker, a man named Howard, says that the world has ended. Someone or something nuked everything on the surface, and he found Michelle's unconscious body and brought her into his bunker to save her. The central tension of the story is whether Howard is telling the truth or lying to manipulate her and keep her prisoner. Howard's a sketchy guy, so it sure seems like he's making all this stuff up. But then we get the scene where Michelle tries to escape and sees a woman do this outside. This convinces her that Howard wasn't lying. But even so, Howard shows more and more signs of mental instability. Michelle discovers that before her, Howard had kidnapped a girl named Brittany and tried to mold her into a replacement for his estranged daughter Megan before eventually killing her. And now he's trying to do the same to Michelle. So Michelle finally decides to escape. She fights and kills Howard and leaves the bunker, only to find that he was telling the truth somewhat. There were no nukes. All the chaos was caused by aliens invading Earth. She fights off an attacking UFO and drives off in hopes of finding a community of survivors to take back their planet. Movie 3 is the Cloverfield Paradox. In the near future, Earth is having an energy crisis, so our main character Ava and a team of astronauts head to space on the Cloverfield space station. They plan to use a device called a Shepard accelerator to harvest unlimited energy. But a TV interview early on hints at the idea that using this device could unleash more than what they bargained for by ripping holes between dimensions. The team uses the Shepard accelerator, and it seems to work, but then all kinds of weird reality-defying events start happening, and the Earth disappears. We eventually figure out that the station was brought to another dimension similar to theirs but not exactly the same. Because the barrier between dimensions is weak, the physics on board the station is warping to follow the laws of physics in other dimensions. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Ava's husband Michael struggles to survive a sudden series of disasters, the cause of which is unclear at first. Most of the astronauts die, but Ava is able to restart the Shepard accelerator and return to her home dimension. But as she lands back on Earth, a Clover monster shoots out of the clouds right when the movie ends. Isn't this fun? It's like a little Cloverfield tribute. Like a little handheld found footage type thing. It makes sense, shut up. Like I keep saying, it's easy to watch these movies and come away thinking they're pretty normal and straightforward, aside from the cliffhanger endings. But there's a lot packed into the background that shed a lot more insight about what's happening. Let's begin at the end of the first movie. In the final scene, the tape runs out, and we get to see the last bit of old footage that wasn't taped over. Rob and Beth are hanging out on Coney Island, and if you look really carefully, you can see something fall from the sky and hit the water. Did you catch it? How about now? Still no, huh? One more time. There it is. During the credits, a voice can be heard saying, but if you reverse the audio, it says, the beginning of the movie is where we learn where the name Cloverfield comes from. In the other two movies, the name is hard to miss, with the street Cloverfield Lane and the Cloverfield space station. But the text at the beginning tells us that Cloverfield is the government codename given to the monster attack and... Wait, was that the Dharma Initiative logo? Like from Lost? Yep, that's definitely it. But this doesn't have any deeper meaning, it's just an Easter egg. I might as well call that out now. Cloverfield has lots of Easter eggs from other J.J. Abrams projects all over the place. But this isn't a cinematic universe or anything, they're just fun nods, nothing more. And since they aren't relevant to the story, I won't spend much time on them. The one important Easter egg that I will talk about is Slush-o. Slush-o is one of the most widespread Abrams Easter eggs, appearing in all his biggest projects. In Cloverfield, Rob's brother Jason is seen wearing a Slush-o shirt, and Slush-o can be spotted in the other two movies, here and here. The reason I'm singling out this Easter egg is because unlike the others, it does have plot relevance, but I'll get to that later. Moving to 10 Cloverfield Lane, the most significant background detail here is the letter to Howard from the company Futura, which is part of the Tagruato Corporation. That's definitely a Japanese name, and in Cloverfield, Rob was leaving New York to move to Japan. The random lady who dies outside the bunker has an especially weird role in all this. This actress also appears in the Cloverfield Paradox as the reporter near the beginning. But they can't be the same character, can they? And speaking of, the guy she's interviewing is named Mark Stambler. That's Howard's last name. His name is Howard Stambler. So they're definitely related somehow. Okay, I keep pointing out these little details that connect the movies, but you might be wondering, why are these movies barely connected at all? They're supposed to be a part of the same series, but the storylines don't link up in any significant way. And it's not just that, it's also the fact that the stories of these movies can't really exist together. Like the first Cloverfield takes place in 2008, and a giant monster destroyed New York City. You'd think that anything that takes place afterwards would acknowledge that, but everything seems pretty normal at the beginning of 10 Cloverfield Lane. Then at the end of 10 Cloverfield Lane, aliens invade. But in the Cloverfield Paradox, there's no mention of them, or the destruction of New York. It's heavily implied that when the Clover monsters show up at the end of Paradox, nobody has ever seen anything like this before. So what gives? Well, there are a few different angles to tackle this question. Let's start with the out-of-universe answers first. The reason later movies don't feel connected is because at first, they weren't connected. 10 Cloverfield Lane and the Cloverfield Paradox were originally made as standalone movies, called The Cellar and The God Particle respectively, before being folded into the Cloverfield franchise later in production. There have also been a handful of other movies that were going to be part of the franchise at one point, but were left as standalones instead, the most notable being the Abrams-produced movie Overlord. The point is, the connection between these movies was always going to be very loose. But there is an in-universe way to connect all the movies, thanks to the Cloverfield Paradox. In that interview, Mark Stambler talks about how using the Shepard accelerator could unleash untold horrors upon the world by opening up alternate universes.
Every time they tested, they risked ripping open the membrane of space-time, smashing together multiple dimensions. This experiment could unleash chaos, the likes of which we have never seen.
Using that, it seems fairly clear that each movie in the franchise takes place in a different universe, and the events of the Cloverfield Paradox sent monsters and aliens and whatnot all across the multiverse to places where they don't belong. It even explains the timeline discrepancies. When Cloverfield Station enters the other Earth, it's with a 14-month time difference. That tells us that the timelines of each universe don't line up exactly. The Shepard Accelerator messes with the boundaries of the multiverse and sends a giant monster to one universe in 2008, aliens to another universe in 2016, and a bunch of monsters to their universe in the present day, which is 2028 by the way. I've seen some people float the idea that it's not really multiple universes, and more of sending each thing back in time and creating a new branching timeline. But that feels like a meaningless distinction to me. That's still a multiverse. So that's all the important information we get from the movies. Does that mean we're finally done gathering the facts, and I can finally start laying out the answers? No. There's still so much more. When the trailer for Cloverfield came out, it didn't explain anything about what the movie was about, or even the title. All it gave was a release date, 1/18/08. People who saw the trailer did some Googling and discovered the website 11808.com, which marked the start of the Cloverfield ARG. If you don't know what that means, ARG stands for Alternate Reality Game, and it's when a piece of media sends fans digging through all kinds of secret codes and hidden messages to piece together its story. Cloverfield used this as a marketing tactic, telling audiences almost no information in the trailer, but getting them to find it for themselves across all these cryptic websites. This continued with the other movies, and the ARG is crucial to getting the full experience of Cloverfield's story. That said, we are sort of coming at this backwards. The way this is supposed to work is that fans dig into the ARG before the movie comes out so that they can piece together what they're about to see and uncover additional context so that they can fully understand and appreciate what happens in the movie. But I, and I bet most of you, saw the movies first and only found out about the ARG later, so that's why I've structured the video like this. But what that means is that a lot of what the ARG reveals is stuff we already know from watching the movies. So I'll be mostly skimming past repeat information and focusing on stuff we haven't heard about yet. Visiting 11808.com brought up a series of photos, some of characters and scenes from the movie, and some with origins that are less clear. You can find a few names scattered around the site, most notably Jamie Lozano. At the time, Googling Jamie's name would lead to a MySpace page for her and for all the most important characters in Cloverfield, where they would all post and comment on each other's pages. And mentioning MySpace, now is as good a time as any to say that most of these ARG websites no longer exist. MySpace doesn't exist anymore, obviously, but also, all the websites created for the ARG have either updated to show new stuff for later movies or been abandoned entirely. So there's no easy way to experience all this as intended. But you can still visit the websites if you download a Flash emulator extension for your web browser and then check out these websites on the Wayback Machine. Besides that, a lot of the information is recorded in places like the Cloverfield fan wiki or on Reddit. But let's get back to it. By reading the MySpace blogs, you find out that Jamie Lozano is in a relationship with a guy named Teddy Hansen. More digging will uncover another website called jamieandteddy.com. This is a website Jamie made to send video messages to Teddy while he's away on some kind of trip. Across these videos, Jamie mentions that Teddy has been contacting her less and less, until she opens a present from him containing a Slush-o hat, a mysterious substance labeled "Jamie, don't eat this," and a recording from Teddy that says,
"Jamie, listen to me. Alright, this is not a joke. If you're hearing this before we've spoken, then it means I've been captured by the company called Tagruato, okay? Tagruato. Now listen, this is important. Don't call the authorities. It'll screw everything up. And just sit tight, wait to hear from Randy. He knows to call you. We're on their station, okay? And it's like they found something, or they're making something, but the point is, I'm not going to be calling you again. You're not going to hear from me again. I just want you to wait for Randy. He will explain.
Jamie assumes this is all a big lie and gets really mad. Out of spite, she eats the stuff that says "do not eat," and over the remaining videos, she rants about how horrible Teddy is while acting more and more erratic. By the way, Jamie does make a very brief appearance in the Cloverfield movie proper. She was a guest at Rob's party, and she can be spotted right here, lying on the couch looking a little rough. Must have been something she ate. But let's dissect what Teddy said in that recording. He was infiltrating a company called Tagruato, and said he was on their station. Tagruato is a name we've heard before. I already mentioned that Howard got a letter from their subsidiary Bold Futura in 10 Cloverfield Lane. But if we go back to the MySpace pages, Rob announces that the reason he's moving to Japan is because he accepted a job offer from a company called Slush-o. HUD comments asking Rob if he's heard of Slush-o's parent company, Tagruato, and any of the shady stuff they've been accused of doing. That leads us to two more new sites, Tagruato.com and Slush-o.com. Let's start with Slush-o. Slush-o is a Japanese drink brand that's very much leaning into the stereotype of weird Japanese branding. Rob shares a commercial that you kinda have to see to believe. Back on 11808.com, there's a photo of a Japanese chef that has a recipe for a noodle dish on the back. One particular ingredient stands out as unusual, something called Seabed's Nectar. Again, Slush-o's parent company is Tagruato, and their website outlines the many businesses under their umbrella: Slush-o, Bold Futura, Yoshida Medical Research, and Parafun Wax Distributors. But they're primarily a deep-sea drilling company. There's a map on the site of all their drilling stations, and the most recently constructed one, the Chuai station, is also the closest one to New York. Shortly before Cloverfield's release date, Tagruato's website appeared to be hacked and vandalized, with text appearing like, "Tagruato is destroying our oceans." We can piece together that this was done by an eco-terrorist group called TIDO. It's a branch of a larger eco-terrorist organization that exists solely to expose Tagruato. TIDO has their own website that further describes how Tagruato is recklessly drilling into the ocean with no regard to the deep-sea life they're disturbing. Oh, and the name Randy pops up here, which if you remember is the guy Teddy mentioned. TIDO doesn't seem to know the full extent of what Tagruato is doing, but one notable story they mention is how a retired Tagruato scientist, Kazui Ichigawa, was found dead along with his entire family after making an amazing discovery. A post on Tagruato's website criticizes a research paper that's raising the alarm about the potential dangers of Seabed's Nectar. If you go hunting, you'll find a page of this paper talking about how Seabed's Nectar does all kinds of weird stuff to your body. By now it's clear that Seabed's Nectar is an ingredient in Slush-os, and from all the marketing we've seen, it appears to make Slush-os highly addictive. I mean, their slogan is, "You can't drink just 6, which once you get past the nonsensical nature of that line, seems to be bragging about how you can't stop drinking them. It sounds like Tagruato is digging up Seabed's Nectar at Chuai Station and is using it to get people hooked on Slush-os. Apparently, Slush-o's stock price shot up right around the time Chuai Station became operational. On the Slush-o website, you could buy merch. Like, real merch that would actually be delivered to your house in real life. When fans in 2007 did this, though, their deliveries would come with pieces of a Tagruato memo about an unspecified incident. There was also a handwritten note on the back from someone called the Whistleblower that says, "The Chuai Station holds a dark secret." By emailing Tagruato's Contact Us email, you would receive an earnings report for every drilling station except Chuai, and a second message from the Whistleblower saying, "No oil here, they must have known before they built." Alongside that, some fans were emailed a sonar reading with a large, suspicious shape. As we got closer to Cloverfield's release date, a whole bunch of news clips were uploaded to YouTube about the sinking of Chuai Station. The whole station just collapsed. Tagruato accuses TIDO of sabotaging the station, but TIDO denies it. The obvious implication here is that the monster did this. That's all the important info we get from the ARG before the movie came out, but afterwards, some comments and a blog pop up from Elise Hansen, Teddy's sister, looking for answers about what happened to him. Eventually, she got a government employee to send her a password-protected site. Following a chain of clues that involved digging through the Cloverfield DVD menus, we were able to get the password and see these photos. The ARG and the franchise as a whole fell dormant for a while, until 10 Cloverfield Lane was announced, and we got a whole bunch more stuff to dig through. Returning to the Tagruato website, we see that Howard Stambler is listed as an Employee of the Month for Bold Futura. Searching the text on Howard's shirt leads you to the website funandprettythings.com, which has a bunch of pictures of stuff little girls would like. But one picture is a still from the movie Pretty in Pink, which in 10 Cloverfield Lane, Howard mentions is his daughter's favorite movie.
Pretty in Pink was one of Megan's favorite movies.
If you type the line that appears on the computer in this scene, "Do you want to talk?" you open up a letter to Megan from Howard. Based on what Howard says in the letter, we can figure out that Howard and his wife separated, his wife took full custody of Megan, and that Howard is using this website to communicate with her in secret. He says in the letter that he needs to warn Megan of something he saw during his time in the Navy. He wants Megan to come find him so they can hide in his bunker together. Across several more letters, Howard mentions more details of note, like how he used to have a job in the Navy working on spy satellites, and how the military covered up whatever it was he saw. Eventually, Megan's mom Denise apparently discovers the secret website, and leaves a message telling Howard to leave Megan alone and get professional help. The last message on the site appears to be a bold Futura employee reaching out to Howard and sending him a mysterious audio file, which can be converted into this image of a shape orbiting Earth. That's all the key details from the 10 Cloverfield Lane section of the ARG, and the franchise went quiet again until the release of the Cloverfield Paradox. Shortly before Paradox came out, Tagruato's website was updated to show a messy error message. Digging behind it, you could find an email describing a new form of energy that Tagruato had discovered. That presumably means that Tagruato invented the Shepard accelerator. Going to 041828.com, you could find a corrupted video of the Mark Stambler interview, which shows more footage we didn't see in the movie mentioning Tagruato. Moving on to Twitter, you can find an account by Mark Stambler, who talks about how he's heard about this video and that people keep asking him about it, but he doesn't know where it came from. He says it's a hoax made with CGI, and that's not him in the video. More corrupted images appear on the Tagruato website leading up to the release date. One is a flyer talking about a Cloverfield Energy initiative, with another note from what looks like TIDO Wave warning us that this is a bad thing. And, that's about it. The Paradox ARG was relatively tiny compared to the other two, maybe because Netflix surprise released the whole movie after the Super Bowl that year. But that's basically all the relevant details from the ARG. It's really annoying to go dig up all the first-hand sources, because these websites keep changing or deactivating, but the fandom has archived all the most important stuff. But we're still not done, because there was also a tie-in manga for the first movie, a 4-issue story called Kishin. For once, we have a story that acknowledges stuff from the ARG, like Tagruato and Slush-o. The manga tells the story of Aiba Kishin, a Japanese teenager whose father works for Tagruato. Towards the beginning of the story, the Clover monster wakes up underneath Chuai Station. As the monster sets off on its rampage, Kishin is kidnapped by a cult that worships the monster. But he's rescued by his father, who explains that Tagruato and this cult ran an experiment where they separated a piece of the monster's DNA, which could be used to control it. But Kishin's mother stole it and put it inside Kishin when he was a baby. Now Tagruato is trying to take the DNA back from Kishin. Kishin's father tries to convince him that he needs to die so that nobody can control the monster. But instead, Kishin makes a mental connection with the monster, and they go on a rampage together. During this process, the monster starts experiencing Kishin's emotions, and the two of them both decide to stop rampaging when they encounter Aiko, the girl Kishin has a crush on. The monster eats Kishin and sinks back into the ocean, where it appears to reform into an egg alongside a bunch of other eggs. Kishin is eventually discovered floating around in the ocean, and he returns home happily ever after, I guess. There was a lot of doubt at the time this came out as to whether it was canon. The monster rampage for the manga is distinctly different from the monster rampage in the movie, and it doesn't feel like both these events could exist alongside each other. However, now that we know that the Cloverfield franchise is a multiverse, this could easily just be another universe. Maybe that's not the most exciting answer, but it's where the evidence points. Either way, I don't see the manga as an especially important piece of the puzzle. It doesn't have much that links up with the rest of what we know. At best, it can be used to see if its general ideas and concepts line up with the movie, which it mostly doesn't. Guess what? More stuff! The Cloverfield Blu-ray had a feature called Special Investigation Mode that added a bunch of informational text on the screen as you watched. It was full of info about the ARG, and it was kind of a way for a more casual fan to find out more of the backstory without having to find it on the internet. It mostly just reiterates stuff we've already talked about, but there are a few things worth noting. It states that the parasites were tested and found to have tons of Seabed's nectar in their blood. It also describes a Japanese government satellite called Chimpanzee 3. Tagruato's website mentioned Chimpanzee 3 briefly, but the Blu-ray goes into more detail about how a piece of it fell into the Atlantic Ocean near New York, that bold Futura was contracted to try and find it, and how the government was currently investigating it all. It fell near New York, you say? Next, I need to touch on things that the people who made all this stuff have said, which may or may not be canon. J.J. Abrams has said that the Clover monster in the first movie was just a baby, looking for its mother. This makes sense considering we see a much larger Clover in Paradox, which suggests that this is what an adult looks like. Here's where things get weird. Cloverfield director Matt Reeves has fairly recently gone on record to say that the thing falling to Earth in the last shot is the monster. But as you might remember from a minute ago, evidence from the ARG suggests that the thing falling to Earth here is a piece of the Chimpanzee 3 satellite. And on top of that, J.J. Abrams has also said that Clover had been under the ocean for hundreds of years. Those are some big contradictions. So I'm gonna ignore that whole mess for now, since even if everything they said made sense, you can't always trust an author's word on their work. At this point, I've finally covered all official sources of Cloverfield lore. But I wanted to end this section with a warning about false info put out there by fans. If you spend enough time with the ARG, you'll likely come across at least one game jack, which is when a fan creates official-looking sources meant to fool other fans into thinking they're part of the ARG. For example, Mark Stambler's Twitter account used to be part of the ARG, but the handle has since been abandoned and claimed by someone who posted a bunch of cryptic secret codes. None of this is part of the canon. I also want to warn you about the fan wiki, because it is far from perfect. Cloverfield isn't the biggest fandom in the world, and when you combine that with how obtuse the lore can be, you end up with a lot of messy wiki pages with false information and theories presented as fact. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've seen fans and the fan wiki mention that Rob survived the bombing at the end of the movie, only to read further and find that they were getting that fact from a fan project called the Cloverfield Files. No, as far as we know, Rob and Beth are dead. So if you decide to do more of your own reading after you watch this video, make sure you double and triple check your sources. It's easy to mistake fan speculation or outright deception for the real thing. Does your brain feel like it's about to explode yet? Well, you can relax a little bit, because I'm finally done summarizing all the Cloverfield media. Except for a few more things that I'll get to in a minute, but don't worry about that right now. I'm going to organize all the information we have, answer any lingering questions, and then give you a big overview of what's happening in this franchise. The first big question has to do with Seabed's nectar. More specifically, what is it? We've already established that Tagruato was harvesting it through the Chuai station because it's highly addictive, and they could use it to get people hooked on Slush-os. It appears that Clover fed on Seabed's nectar, which the parasites then absorbed from Clover. According to that research paper, Seabed's nectar causes rapid cell growth, so it's likely that eating it is how Clover got so big. But while it might be good for Clover, it's dangerous for humans. Refer back to that research article and what happened to Jamie. Plus, there's an infamous testimonial line on the Slush-o website that says, Slush-os make my stomach explode with pure happiness. It's hard not to draw a parallel between that and what happened to Marlena when the parasites got a hold of her. We can safely conclude that putting this stuff into your body is a bad idea. Not that Tagruato cares. Okay, so besides getting people to buy Slush-os, what was Tagruato's endgame here? What were they trying to do? I think their motives were pretty basic as far as evil fictional corporations go. They want to make money and will do anything to get it. The wrinkle in explaining their motives is that there are multiple Tagruatos across multiple dimensions, but it all boils down to the same thing more or less. Tagruato discovers some kind of amazing but dangerous sci-fi thing, and then tries to control and profit from it. In the first movie's universe, they harvested Seabed's nectar to put in Slush-os. At some point during this business venture of theirs, they came across Clover under the ocean, and did everything they could to keep it a secret, so they could, profit from it somehow. In the Cloverfield Paradox, they create the Shepherd Accelerator to harvest unlimited energy, ignoring any potential dangers that would go with it. In 10 Cloverfield Lane, they seem to know about the upcoming alien invasion through both Futura, but we're told comparatively little about what they're up to in this universe. Alongside the Tagruato subsidiaries we keep talking about, there are two more that I barely mentioned: Yoshida Medical Research and Parafun Wax Distributors. How do they factor in? The reason they haven't come up much is because they're not very relevant to the story, but they do have small roles to play. Yoshida Medical Research is what it sounds like, medical research. But specifically, we get one letter from a researcher who talks about experimenting with Seabed's nectar. That's about it, though. And Parafun Wax sells paraffin wax, which is a real material that's made from petroleum. Since Tagruato is an oil drilling company, this makes perfect sense. But it's not really plot relevant, other than the fact that this is where Teddy worked. Okay, let's tackle some questions about TIDO Wave, like who the whistleblower is. Unfortunately, we don't have a ton of information on them. All we really know is that they're a member of TIDO Wave who went undercover as a Tagruato employee. It's not Teddy, since he died when Chuai Station collapsed, and the whistleblower kept sending messages after that. If it's not Teddy, then there really aren't any other notable characters that would fit this role. It's very possible that the whistleblower's true identity is someone we've never been introduced to, which is annoying, but I guess it doesn't change that much about the story. Now here comes maybe the most vexing question of the franchise to date. How did the monster get to Earth, and how long was it there before it woke up? This seems like it would be a critical part of the narrative, but there is so little concrete information about it. Let's talk about the timeline as we understand it. Clover attacks on May 22nd, 2008. Robin Beth's Coney Island date was a month before, on April 27th. This is when you can see that object fall from space. Most people's first assumptions were that this was the monster. That's what would make the most narrative sense, and also that's what Matt Reeves said it was. But then, what destroyed Chuai Station in late December 2007? What was in that sonar image sent by the whistleblower around that same time? The timeline doesn't add up. But if it's not the monster, what did fall to Earth in this shot? Well, we've already mentioned it, Chimpanzee 3. For a long time, the fandom assumed that this is what it was. The description of where and when the satellite piece fell to Earth fits the Coney Island scene to a T. But again, the timeline doesn't add up. Chimpanzee 3 is first mentioned in an article on Tagruato's website, published before the one on the station's collapse, again in December. So what gives? Every possible explanation clashes with the established dates. Wait, Does that say 118? Wait. No, this photo was not taken on January 18th. It's clearly stated in the movie that the party and the monster attack happened on May 22nd. And if this date is wrong... Okay, big disclaimer. We are now entering the realm of speculation. Whenever I make these videos, I'd much rather stick to the facts as we have them, without mixing in my own opinions and guesswork to fill in what we don't know, because I want to give you all the chance to decide that for yourselves. But in this case, I have no choice. The timeline of when the monster came to Earth affects the entire rest of the story, so I think I need to narrow down what I think happened. If this date is wrong, then that opens up the possibility that the other dates are also wrong, which is a hard thing to swallow, since most ARGs tend to hinge on every little detail adding up. But if we assume that it's true, then a lot of other things start adding up. According to the movies, the thingy fell to the ocean in April, and the monster attacked in May. In the ARG, the satellite fell to Earth in December, the monster destroyed the station a few days later, and then the monster attacked New York in January. In both scenarios, there's a month in between. So we can imagine that there was a miscommunication about specific dates between the writers of this whole thing, and shift everything over. Now it makes sense. A few days after this thing fell in the ocean, the monster destroyed Chuai Station, and then attacked New York a month later. But then, did the monster arrive on this day? Or was it always under the ocean and only just woke up? What fell from the sky in April/December? Let me throw out a few possibilities. I think that no matter how you slice it, this is Chimpanzee 3. We're given way too many specifics that tell us that Chimpanzee 3 fell to Earth in this location at this time. Tagruato then offered its services in finding the satellite as an excuse to go probing deeper into the ocean for the monster. It's too perfect to ignore. That said, that doesn't mean this isn't also the monster. I see two possibilities here. One, the monster fell from space and knocked off a piece of Chimpanzee 3 on the way down, and this object is both of them. The monster then made its way to Chuai Station, ate a buttload of Seabed's nectar, and exploded in size. 2. The monster was always at the bottom of the ocean, this was just the satellite, and Tagruato used the satellite search as a cover to finally delve deep enough to get at the monster, accidentally waking it up in the process. The fandom generally treats scenario 2 as the canon answer, but there's no definitive explanation with hard proof. I can't totally ignore the possibility that this was the monster, because if we step away from raw facts for a minute and look at the narrative, it feels a lot more satisfying. The direct and obvious implication in the movie is that this is the moment the monster showed up. How underwhelming is it to think that this is some random satellite you've never heard of and that nobody cares about? So unless we get more info, I'm going to have to go with majority rule here and assume that this is the Chimpanzee 3 satellite, and that the monster was already under Chuai Station long before this. But, I don't know, man. Getting any definitive answer on this seems like a pipe dream. Even the creators don't seem to know. Best case scenario, we get more clarification in the next movie. Speaking of, the franchise isn't done. A new Cloverfield movie is apparently in production right now, and sources say it'll be a more direct sequel to the first movie than before. In early 2023, Slush-o's website updated to a new format, which would indicate that a new chapter of the ARG is beginning. We'll have to wait and see. But in the near future, there should be more information out there beyond what I've covered in this video, so keep your eyes peeled. Okay, we are now leaving the realm of speculation! And last question, is Clover a kaiju? Definitely yes, for all the reasons I already talked about in my kaiju video. But as for whether Clifford the Big Red Dog is a kaiju, you'll have to watch that video to find out. Alright, let's bring it all together in one big summary. Within the Cloverfield franchise, there are many alternate universes. Some are pretty similar to ours, but some have crazy monsters and wacky physics. Those dimensions were separate, but in the dimension of the Cloverfield Paradox, the Shepherd Accelerator broke down the barriers between them and sent all kinds of weirdness back and forth across them all. In the story as we know it, there are 5 relevant dimensions. I'll call the universe of the first movie Dimension A, the universe of 10 Cloverfield Lane Dimension B, the main universe of the Cloverfield Paradox Dimension C, the dimension that Cloverfield Station travels to Dimension D, and the manga Dimension E. The Shepherd Accelerator sends Cloverfield Station from Dimension C to Dimension D. Once there, certain things begin to overlap. The station from C merges with certain aspects of the station from D, which is how Jensen gets on board, and why Volkov seems to have 2 sets of memories in his head. Also, the laws of physics from various far-off dimensions start bleeding into this one, which causes the many strange and impossible events that happen on board. The surviving crew eventually restarts the Shepherd Accelerator and returns to Dimension C, but the damage has been done, and monsters are sent all over the multiverse. A full-grown Clover monster is brought to Dimension C, A baby is sent to Dimension A in the distant past, where it sleeps under the ocean, and aliens are sent to Dimension B. Those are all the events we know of, but who knows how many other universes were affected. In all these dimensions, there exists the corporation Tagruato. They do different things in each dimension, but they always have the same goal. Find the weird supernatural stuff before anyone else does, get control of it, and profit. In Dimension C, Tagruato designed the Shepard Accelerator. They wanted to create unlimited energy and solve the energy crisis, but they had no regard for the possible dangers of messing with the multiverse, ignoring warnings from people like Mark Stambler. In Dimension B, they were keeping tabs on the aliens for years through their military tech company Bold Futura, but they kept it quiet. During this time, one of Bold Futura's employees, Howard Stambler, stumbled on all this, and realized that whatever they were covering up was probably the same thing he came across during his time in the Navy. Howard became paranoid about this thing causing the end of the world. But because he was a low-ranking employee, he wasn't able to access specifics about what it was. Howard quit his job and built a doomsday bunker, not knowing exactly what he was prepping for, but knowing it was coming. His increasing paranoia caused his wife Denise to leave him, taking their daughter Megan with her. Howard desperately tried to reach Megan with his website and convince her to join him in his bunker, but to no avail. In his delusion, he kidnapped a local girl named Brittany to be the replacement Megan, but when she resisted, he killed her. The day of the alien invasion, he kidnapped Michelle for the same purpose. The alien invasion proved Howard was right all along, although he's still deranged, and he died never knowing exactly what it was that came to Earth. But back to Tagruato. It's in Dimension A where they have the most involvement. Their main business is drilling for oil deep in the ocean, but one day, they discovered a supply of a strange substance in the Atlantic, which they called Seabed's Nectar. This substance tasted really, really good, but it also messes with your body chemistry and makes you grow bigger and stronger, becoming deadly in large doses. They also found that Seabed's Nectar was the primary food source of a huge monster. They knew that they had something valuable in the form of this creature, but they didn't know exactly what it was or what to do with it. But in the meantime, harvesting Seabed's Nectar had the potential to make them a lot of money. They built Chuai Station to harvest Seabed's Nectar to use its addictive properties to make Slush-os, all with the cover story of drilling for oil. And they were happy to suppress or kill anyone who got too close to the truth about the dangers of Seabed's Nectar or the monster. But an activist group called TIDO caught on to the suspicious nature of Chuai Station, and the fact that Tagruato claimed to be digging for oil, but there was no oil there. They started infiltrating Tagruato to figure out what they were hiding. They got into contact with a whistleblower at the company to feed them information, and they sent members like Teddy Hansen undercover on Chuai Station. Teddy knew this mission was risky, so as a failsafe, he mailed whatever evidence he had to his girlfriend, Jamie Lascano. Unfortunately, Jamie didn't understand any of this, and she decided to eat the large sample of Seabed's Nectar Teddy sent, leading to her death. During all this, Rob Hawkins is hired as a vice president of Slush-o, which requires him to move from New York to Japan, although he knows nothing about any of the Seabed's Nectar or monster stuff. A piece of a Japanese government satellite, Chimpanzee 3, breaks off and falls near the coast of New York. Tagruato offers the services of Bold Futura to the Japanese government to try and find it. But this was all just an excuse to send more probes into the ocean to finally get some more info on this monster to find out what it was they had their hands on. This turns out to be a huge mistake. A few days later, they accidentally wake the monster up, and it destroys Chuai Station, killing many of the people on board, including Teddy. Now, Tagruato is in full damage control mode. They blame the sinking of Chuai Station on an attack by TIDO, but they have bigger problems. The monster is heading towards New York, and a month later, on the day of Rob's going away party, it levels New York City. The United States government evacuates who they can, and bombs the monster to oblivion. Rob and almost every character in the movie dies in the attack, and the monster is declared dead, although apparently there are still some lingering questions, but the most important story beats are all there. And as for anything we still don't know, we can hope the next movie and the next ARG give us more to work with. So that's the story of Cloverfield explained. But is that mystery fun to try and solve? How well does it function as a combination of story and puzzle? If you're new here, this is the part where I break down the 10 key qualities that a mystery box story should have, the best practices for integrating a complex, long-running mystery into a story, and whether Cloverfield does them well. Check out my other videos if you want to know more. First, does the Cloverfield franchise begin by showing us a big and obvious question for us to wonder about? No, unless you count where the monster came from. But conventions of the kaiju genre dictate that that's not something you should concern yourself with. It came from the ocean, yada yada, it doesn't matter. It's only once you come across the ARG that you realize just how much information there is to discover, and how many questions there are to answer about everything that happened. And every big question is tied to the Clover monsters and Tagruato. Like I was just saying, the mysteries are not known to the audience. There's no indication in the movies that you're supposed to try and figure out the plot, and most people watching just walk away thinking they're cool sci-fi monster movies with a few details left up to interpretation. Ordinarily, I wouldn't describe a 3-movie series as long by mystery box standards, but the sheer amount of content in the ARG means there's tons of stuff that takes a ton of time to sift through. I'd say the franchise paces its reveals pretty well. It makes sure each individual movie is self-contained enough to be enjoyed by casual viewers, but it also has a never-ending drip of ARG stuff that keeps people on their toes. There's always at least one question for us to investigate. Now, technically, everything we see on screen and in the ARG is diegetic. It all really happened, and it all has concrete in-universe explanations. But the problem here is that there's a lot of out-of-universe messiness that gets in the way of the fun. J.J. Abrams and Matt Reeves keep saying stuff about the lore that contradict each other, and there's the whole mess with the dates possibly being wrong. When you're solving a mystery in a work of fiction, you have to have faith that everything in the story was deliberate, that the creators set up this puzzle in a way that you can solve. These mistakes and inconsistencies throw doubt over all the information we get, and it sucks the fun out trying to figure out what's canon and what's not. Does the ending of the story give us satisfying answers to the majority of questions? Well, technically the story isn't over. We're still going to get new Cloverfield movies. I don't usually make a video on a franchise before it's done, but I made an exception here because it's easy to treat what we have as a complete story if we want. And I'm very happy with the amount of answers we got. Maybe not very happy. There's still that part of me that wants to sit down with J.J. Abrams and force him to explain every little thing. But that's the goal of media like this. We have all the answers to the big questions about what the monster is and what everyone's motivations are. Now we can speculate ad infinitum about all the smaller details, ensuring that we can engage with the story forever. But as for the answers we got, were they planned in advance, or just slapped together after the fact? I'm inclined to say the latter. We know that the sequels didn't start out as Cloverfield movies and were folded into the franchise later. There's a lot here that was clearly decided on late in the game. And the comments from the creators show that the creation of this storyline was messy and not the perfectly planned puzzle that most ARGs should be. And finally, do the mysteries sync up with the emotional journeys of the characters? Not really. Sure, in a literal sense, the characters are affected by what happens in the lore, and having Rob work for Slush-o was a nice touch. But in the movies, all the characters have other things to worry about besides the origins of these monsters. They're not trying to solve any mysteries, they're trying not to get killed. The mystery behind Tagruato is incidental to the characters, which means that it's incidental to all but the most hardcore fans. Mystery or no mystery, these movies are good. You can enjoy them even if you couldn't care less about the lore. But if you are curious, there's plenty to explore. This was really my first time experiencing an ARG myself rather than watching somebody else explain it to me. And it was certainly an experience, a frustrating experience, but a rewarding one. I'm more hyped than ever about the new movie, whenever it finally comes out. And you can probably expect a sequel to this video once the new round of ARG stuff is over. I'm hungry for more information, which is a sign that the story did its job. Cloverfield gets a final mystery box rating of 5 out of 10.